Spoiler alert, the game you're about to see ends in a loss for the blue team, and yet, this game exemplifies World of Warships Legends at its best. Because too many times these days, in the high tiers, Tier 8, Tier 7, Legendary tier, you'll take out a ship, you'll load into a match, and within the first 5 or 6 minutes, one team will have lost so many ships that it becomes insurmountable for them, and they will lose in a blowout. That seems to happen quite often at high tiers. It happens at the lower tiers too, although it is more difficult to achieve that since the lower tier ships have less firepower and are a little bit more forgiving to play than the ships up at Tier 8. But in these high tiers, you don't often see games that are decided in the final 5 minutes. This game is one such game, and even though we lose, I enjoy having games like this so much more than I enjoy those 5-minute blowouts. And plus, they can go on YouTube, and there's a lot of value to be gleaned from them. We'll be taking a look, well, a short look, at the Tier 8 Tech Tree Italian destroyer Adriatico today. I posted a video on the Tier 7, the Cuniberti, some time ago. I said I thought the ship was pretty good and it can win games. The same is true of the Adriatico, although it is an obvious improvement over the Cuniberti. The improvements are marginal, of course. It has the same amount of guns, same SAP and HE characteristics, but the Adriatico has more HP, and all in all, what it is a Tashkent, basically. It is a Tashkent hull. It looks a little bit different, and it sort of plays like a Tashkent, although it is a little bit slower, and the main guns don't have the same range as the Tashkent, so it's not quite the same open water gunboat type thing. It also doesn't have a heel, but what it does have is 4 charges of the Italian rolling smoke and a special engine boost that lasts for a short amount of time, but buffs the speed on the ship by 20%, which is quite significant. Puts this thing up past 40 miles, or 40 knots. I think somewhere in the mid-40 range, possibly even closer to 50 if you want to build into speed for it, so that makes you pretty difficult to hit. In the opening moments of this game, we managed to get into the Alpha Cap. Note how when we got into it, we made sure to point our bow back toward our spawn. This is something you want to do when you're in a destroyer, especially if you're going to enter a cap without any intelligence data. Obviously, we couldn't see any enemy ships. We were located, and I think that might have been courtesy of the Kronstadt here, who did manage to radar us, but it was an inopportune radar. We were not in his line of sight when he did it, and while they did manage to get a little bit of damage on us, it wasn't catastrophic. However, things are not looking super great. The Kronstadt himself is, of course, pushing in, we know that, but behind him we see one outline of a red battleship, and, well, 2 outlines, actually. One of them was briefly spotted. But there's at least 2 battleships in tow behind this Kronstadt, and I think there's even more than that, if I remember correctly. Yes, there's not 1, not 2, but 3 battleships in tow. All of them are pushing into the Alpha Cap against me in the Adriatico. We've also got a cruiser behind me and an Iowa. So, of course, we're outnumbered on this cap, and even though I have solo flipped it, we're going to have to give it up. We can't obviously push into 4 ships like this, or we'll simply sink. Same is true of our cruiser and battleship teammate. Our job now that we have discovered we are in fact on the weak flank is to kite away and delay the enemy team from taking Alpha for as long as possible. They flip Bravo, which is of course a problem. If they're allowed to flip Alpha, that means they're going to have a 2-cap advantage, and their points accrual is going to be faster than ours. So that's going to put them ahead and probably allow them to gain the lead. We're shooting at the Kronstadt, taking cover behind the island so we're not spotted. Our Iowa or our cruiser are spotting the targets for us. The SAP, as you can see on the Adriatico, is, it's effective when it hits and it penetrates. It's doing about 1,000 damage to this Kronstadt per salvo, which is fine. But, of course, because these are SAP, and SAP, in principle, is kind of an overpowered shell type. After all, it takes the best features of both high explosive and armor piercing and combines them with very little of the downside of either of those shell types. But as such, it can't be allowed to have pinpoint accuracy. You see that on the cruisers, the battleships that shoot sap, and the destroyers. The guns simply aren't accurate, so even correct aim is not going to reward you all the time. You're still going to have shells that hit armor surfaces that you weren't aiming at, that they can't penetrate, or they're going to fall in the water in front of or behind the ship. The torpedoes, of course, on the Adriatico, like the rest of the Italian destroyers, are colloquially known as the Italian sea mines. They've only got a speed of like 50 knots, and they hit like little throw pillows when they make contact with an enemy ship. You can see that they're so very slow. The Kronstadt and the battleship behind him are more or less able to avoid all of them. Kronstadt isn't going to get lucky. He is going to take one, and it only does 7,300 damage. Does start a flood, which is nice, but the Kronstadt promptly damage controls that flood, and he's got us in radar. But note, we were hanging around this island the entire time, and we were doing that just in case the Kronstadt did decide to radar. That way we would have an escape route. We'd be able to put this island between ourselves and the enemy team for the duration. So there's another wasted radar on the Kronstadt's part. It did spot us for the full duration, but nobody was able to get any damage thanks to our position here behind the island. Unfortunately, we've basically run out of friends. To nobody's surprise, these 4 enemy ships over here managed to combine their firepower against the Iowa, who actually, never mind, he is still alive. I thought he had perished, but fear not, he'll perish soon. He's sitting bow in to 4 separate ships. He has no route of escape, and bow tanking, especially against superior numbers, does not really help you that much. The only reason he probably hasn't sunk yet is because I'm spotted. I'm too close to the Kronstadt to disengage, and so I'm shooting at him, trying to take him down. Basically, at this point, I thought all was lost, and we would perish, and this video would not end up on YouTube, but that's not quite what's going to happen. The Adriatico is, after all, pretty fast. We've got poor concealment on this build. I think it's 6.7 km, but we're out of detect range for the Kronstadt now, and we've gone dark. The enemy team has managed to sink the Iowa. They've also flipped Alpha, and they've held Bravo for some time now. All that's left, really, though, on that Charlie side of the map, and he's not really even on that Charlie side of the map, is the lone enemy cruiser you see up near the corner of the map. That, I believe, is the enemy Weimar, driven by another community contributor for World of Warships Legends, a man by the name of Spotted Gecko. If you've never looked at his channel, he is like the nicest YouTuber on the internet. He is Canadian, of course, and they do have a reputation for being polite. Spotted Gecko does nothing to counteract that stereotype. He lives up to it. He's a very friendly guy if you ever check out his streams. Anyway, he's up there in the Weimar, and I thought initially my teammates over there near the Charlie Cap were going to fall into the trap of chasing the kiting cruiser to the edge of the map, and I think some of them did get ensnared by that trap, but you'll see the destroyer and the 2 battleships are turning around. The friendly destroyer is in the Bravo Cap, which is great if we want to win this game, and the win is still very much obtainable for us. Then what we need to do is flip the Bravo capture circle and hold on to it while also not sinking. Flipping the Bravo cap is going to be easy. The destroyer is going to do that with basically no opposition. There is still 1 red destroyer left, but we have no idea where he is, and I don't even think he's been spotted this entire game. I don't see his last known position on the minimap, so he might be a super stealthy torpedo boat, but we know he's not around Bravo or Charlie, so as long as we flip this cap, we'll be good. Meanwhile, the battleship teammates of mine are benefiting from the spotting, courtesy of me and the other destroyer, and this Alabama is looking pretty low. Debating on whether we want to fire at him or not, but we decide his guns aren't quite pointed toward us, so maybe we can get away with it, and we pop the engine boost, which, again, gives us a 20% speed boost. in order to avoid his return salvo, and we're quite successful in that. This thing can bob and weave in the open water, much like the Tashkent, especially when the engine boost is active. But it only lasts for about 40 seconds, and you can see we're up to about 46 knots or so. Once it goes away, our top speed will be more like around 40 knots, and it'll be easier for the enemy ships to hit us, but I don't think we have to worry about that from the Alabama. He is about to go down. Looks like our destroyer teammate has suffered from an unforced error. He did get spotted and shot at by the Alabama, but he managed to take him down with his torpedoes, so all's well that ends well. Meanwhile, we do have 2 capture circles to the enemy's 1, and we are about to overtake them on points. We just need nobody to sink, and that's easier said than done. Our cruiser teammate earlier that spawned in Alpha made the cardinal error of pushing straight into the enemy's spawn in an outnumbered position. He is currently dueling Spotted Gecko, but it's not a fair 1v1 because he's got the last remaining red battleship aside from this Massachusetts sitting in the Alpha cap on his broadside, and to nobody's surprise, the cruiser goes down. It was a Brindisi. Looks like Spotted Gecko got the sinking blow on that guy, but he stood no chance versus the Weimar and the other battleship. The Massachusetts, however, is faring just about as well as the Brindisi, although he's going to take a lot longer to sink because he's got more armor. He's sitting here bow in toward our battleship while being torpedoed by both me and the other friendly destroyer. Our smokescreen runs out, so we get spotted, but that's okay. I don't mind being spotted at this point. We're sort of at the tail end of our gun range, and should the Massachusetts choose to shoot at us with his main battery, hopefully he's going to miss. Our battleship teammate, though, is on perilously low health, and so, of course, the Massachusetts is not going to shoot at us. He's going to focus down that battleship, and he succeeds in taking him down. That leaves just me, the destroyer, and 1 other battleship left. Destroyer's got torpedoes on the Massachusetts. It didn't look like any of his hit, and I don't think any of mine did either. So we really need to take this guy down. He does get touched there by our last remaining battleship teammate pretty good, and he appears to be on fire or maybe flooding. Maybe flooding, actually. I guess he did get hit by one of the friendly DD's torpedoes, and he doesn't appear to have DCP, so that should spell the end of the Massachusetts and put us back down to an even ship count, 3v3. There he goes. So it is 3v3 now, 2 destroyers and 1 battleship on the blue team versus Spotted Gecko in the Weimar, a destroyer whose identity is still a mystery, and that last remaining battleship who, as far as we know, is still hanging around the Alpha cap. Of course, there are some problems here. We could theoretically win, but our battleship really doesn't have a lot of HP left. It's a Bismarck, and I'm pretty sure the last remaining battleship is some sort of American one on the enemy team, and he's nearly at full health, so we probably don't have much of a chance, unless we can find the destroyer. It's the Hayate. Hayate is actually a bit scary. Note, we start this engagement with this guy at full HP and us at half HP. Hayate's gun power is indeed impressive, and its torpedoes are lethal, especially to other enemy destroyers. Luckily, we avoid those, but we're not able to avoid his main battery firepower. We're trying to juke his shots here and there, messing with the throttle, going backwards and forwards, but because we're spotted, Gecko in the Weimar is also shooting at us. I think he actually just made contact with us there, but he's mostly missing thanks to our throttle juking. We really need to take this Hayate down now. We've got our teammates shooting at him. I thought I was probably going to get sunk here, so I launched the torpedoes in a last-ditch effort. Almost take down the Hayate, but the Bismarck finishes him off with a secondary hit. So there's the last remaining destroyer dead. Unfortunately, before he was taken down, he did manage to flip the cap circle, and the enemy team is now ahead of us on points, and now their lead is insurmountable. The Bismarck goes down, and there's basically no way for us to win this game unless we can sink the both of them in the next 30 seconds, which is impossible, unfortunately, so we do lose. But at the same time, I would much rather play a game like this, where it really does come down to the last couple of minutes, and up until, a few moments ago when we lost the Bismarck, and when we lost the battleship before that, this really was anybody's game. It could have gone either way, and I think we did as well as we could in the Adriatico. We did our job as a destroyer, so did our teammate over there, but I think ultimately the positioning of the larger capital ships was the problem in this match. If the team had done a little bit better positioning, that Z46 or whatever it was and myself probably could have won that game. But we didn't. This is a team game after all. Adriatico's pretty neat. I think we'll review it in detail in a video in the future, but I hope you like this one for today. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.